We welcome everyone out there and greet you with a smile and with a return guest. But welcome to the Law, Your Money, and You. I'm Roberta Saphire, an attorney in Sharon, Massachusetts, New England, United States.
Hi, and welcome. I'm Camille Barron, a financial coordinator and healthcare advisor from the same place as Roberta is from. But we're in different locations because of the virus. We're not in the studio. And we're so happy that a guest that we had on recently to talk about the COVID-19 impact on the economy is back for a return, because there's just so much to this topic that we couldn't afford to just have it stop at the first show. So Roberta, would you like to introduce our guest?
I sure would. And not only introduce the guest, but he's going to tell us again about all those abbreviations and the single words that are just fantastic, amazing. He's amazing. Cliff Caplan, and he's been around longer than he looks. He just looks good. Cliff, thank you for coming here. We finally
call it window dressing, Roberta.
Yeah, thanks for the compliment. Family jeans could go a long way.
Oh yeah. CC, welcome, Cliff. Let's get into this. Tell us where we left off, a little bit about yourself, how you're doing. You're making money for other people.
All right. Well, I'm a certified financial planner. Designation. I've had a long time, 32 years to be exact. But my practice really is revolves around wealth management. In particular, I would say the focus of my practice is retirement income planning. Many of my clients have been with me for many, many years. I've worked with them through the accumulation stage of their life, and in many cases now through the distribution stage as they've retired and are living off of income. And these, to say the least, are trying times to ensure that we can continue to generate that type of income given where we are economically.
And so what we did discuss a little bit the last time, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on the accumulation and distribution phases and how the economy affects those. But we've seen still some volatility in the market, which of course would impact both of those phases. What have you been seeing with your clients in this regard?
Well, everybody, Camille, still is obviously very concerned about volatility. As you know, we discussed this today on September 22nd. Yesterday, which was Monday, the market had a significant decline. We never know until after the fact, perhaps, why it happened, but I don't generally concern myself with short-term volatility. But the fact is, for the last few weeks now, the stock market has been in decline. Technology, in particular, which had led the market, has been in decline, which is something that any market observer would have expected. But again, a lot of it has to do with the uncertainty on so many different fronts as we proceed through the fall.
Well, yes, as a matter of fact, of course, we've had uncertainty around the coronavirus. And as we approach the fall, we know now that it's been predicted, and we're starting to see examples of increases. And of course, we have the double exposure with the flu. But other than that, there's uncertainty around other things, in particular because we're in an election year, and the politics that go along with that also creates uncertainty, doesn't it, Cliff?
Yes, it does. Now, you know, I've been doing this a long time and have gone through many presidential elections. And generally speaking, while there can be short-term volatility, even 4 years ago, when the market initially declined and then jumped on President Trump's election, I think this time could be different. It's a confluence of events. You know, we hear the story about the mail-in ballots and the fact that on November 3rd, election night, we may not have a clear-cut outcome. It could be several weeks down the road. That could send just not the country into chaos, but possibly the markets as well. We add the additional factor which just occurred this past Friday of the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the fight, the political fight that's going to ensue in terms of ramming through a Supreme Court justice, a conservative Supreme Court justice to replace her. And the political situation this time could be very problematic. I've always said for years that history does repeat itself, but with caveats. And I think the caveat this time around might be more significant than I've ever seen in my lifetime.
But here's a question. I'm sorry, just my train of thought here. Tell us how the fact that there will likely be a Supreme Court nominee and probably installation or approval, how does that affect the economy?
Well, I don't think
That's a
that
good
itself can
question.
affect the economy. I think the process to get there is really what we're talking about. The Democrats really can't do very much to prevent this. Their really only hope, and I'm stating things that everybody knows, is that they can get 4 Republican senators on board to delay this. And so all they can do is hope, if they don't succeed, that if in fact Biden wins the election and the Democrats retake the Senate, that they can retaliate against the Senate. And that's something that I don't believe is in anybody's best interests. What we need is less polarization, not more. And so that's really the scenario I see. Maybe a couple of Republican senators may come out of the woodwork and decide that they too would like a delay, but I think that's unlikely in this political climate.
Yeah, and here's a question that people might ask. You're dealing with the market. Why? And a lot of people, I hear this from time to time, they say, well, why should the elections or anything affect the market and what stock prices are or retirement? How do they intertwine without getting too political?
Well, one of the issues, of course, are the agendas of each party. Whether you like Trump or not, many of his policies that have been passed by the Republican Senate have actually been very beneficial to business owners, to the markets, and that is likely to continue should he be reelected. On the other side, the Democrats tend to they want more government intervention. They've talked about some kind of wealth tax to address the huge disparity that it continues to widen between the haves and the have-nots. And obviously, in many cases, higher taxes is not something that the market likes to see. There's also the issue of healthcare, which we could probably spend 5 shows on, and Camille is in a much better position to address that issue than am I. But some of the issues that might come about from healthcare. What is interesting, though, is that both Trump and Biden do want to address the issue of extremely high costs of prescription drugs, and so that's something that could obviously have a major impact on pharmaceutical companies, maybe even biotech companies. So there's a lot of moving parts here, but I would think, and I guess in general, that if Trump is reelected, that the markets are likely to respond more favorably than if Biden is elected.
Yeah, just so too our viewers know that we're non-political and we don't advocate anybody should vote for this person or that person or
Exactly.
anything like that. You're just calling it as you see it. I don't want afterwards anybody to.
I'm trying to give both sides and
Yeah.
things that I look at in terms of the effect of either candidate or administration on the markets.
Will you go over those abbreviations for the people who didn't hear them
Sure.
before?
So there's 2 that I use when addressing why the stock market has rebounded so well from April. And one is Tina, the girl's name, which stands for There Is No Alternative. That is simply, and the second really is sort of a corollary of that. But when you have interest rates at between 0 to 0.25%, and our viewers who have money in the money market know this, you're getting approximately 0.1% on your money market. Investors tend to migrate over to the stock market where they have hopes of getting a better return. And so that is the first acronym. And the other one is FOMO, F-O-M-O, fear of missing out, which, as I said, is sort of a corollary to Tina. And that is when you have a stock market that up until 3 weeks ago was going great guns, led by companies, the FANG stocks, which is the third acronym I use, Roberta, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and you can add Microsoft to that list. But you can also add Tesla. Tesla is a fascinating story. That stock has increased exponentially this year. And people jump on board. They see a stock like that skyrocketing, and they jump on board, which tends to add to volatility, both on the upside and the downside. So it's I said, it's been really interesting. One of the things I just want to point out, and these are things that I look at, is that those FANG stocks that I mentioned, you can even add Tesla to it, represent around 27% of the market capitalization of the Standard & Poor's 500, which are the 500 largest companies. And in fact, Apple, which is the largest company out there by a sliver, I think, over Amazon, I think represents 6% itself. And when you have a market that's so skewed by just a few stocks, and they're all in one sector, in this case, technology, that can be maybe alarming is too strong a word, but certainly something to be concerned about. Because if those stocks begin to pull back, and they are pretty pricey, you could see a significant drawback on the stock market.
Now tell us, Cliff, we're in September of 2020, and these shows are really not time specific, but the time that we're in is also unusual. It was announced, I think last week, that the Fed is going to keep the interest rates down. What kind of an impact do you see that having?
I think it was reassuring to the markets, and because low interest rates serve a few purposes which can hopefully fuel the market. One is, and you're seeing this, for example, in the mortgage market, okay? I have a son who's buying a condominium. He's closing within 60 days. Interest rates on 30-year mortgages are under 3%, 2.875 in that range. In my lifetime, I never thought I'd see rates that low, all right? That helps. But in the same vein, corporations, which have issued bonds in the past with higher interest rates, even if those interest rates are only in the 4 to 5% range, are refinancing and saving. I just read, for example, a local company here, Dell. I say local, Dell is really out of Texas, but they own EMC, which is out of Hopkinton. They're saving something like I may have this wrong, something like $200 million of interest a year just by refinancing their corporate debt. So those low interest rates it has a very positive effect on that aspect of the economy, whereas a negative effect is on savers. All right, because as I indicated earlier, you're getting 0.1% in the money market, but even other types of bonds, the interest rate is quite low right now. It's very, very difficult, particularly for retirees. And I mentioned I have many clients that are on what I call
Dell Computers. You're talking Dell, the ones that make the computers?
That's correct. And Dell owns EMC, which is out of, as I said, out of Hopkinton.
So the consumer should be getting computers and stuff like that for less money. Do you think, does it go that way, or do they just?
Well, I think technology in general the price has been going down. I mean, if you want to look at technology, look at TV sets. I just bought a new smart TV. I'm behind the 8 ball just about a month and a half ago. I spent $1,000 on it, and I remember my first HD set back about 10 or 15 years ago. I can't remember exactly. It was $3,000, and the technology is so ancient compared to what's available today. So, price, you just think about how that price of that kind of TVs, smart TVs, computers, that on a whole other context, that is deflationary. The fact that these
I paid $5,200 for the first laptop.
Oh, sure. And I bought a new laptop for my assistant not long ago. It was $900. So
it's amazing that TVs have gone down. I remember I spent $3,200 about, what was it, 8 or 10 years ago on a 55-inch. And now you can get what, 80 inches?
And that turns out that's the size of my new TV. I bought it for $1,000. So
yeah, man.
Where do you live? Are we invited over?
Yeah, we'll watch the Super Bowl without fans.
Yes. So here's another aspect that you alluded to, and we also touched upon it the first episode. The economy from the standpoint of the market versus the economy from the standpoint of the consumers who are not invested in the market. In other words, the people who are on the mid to lower end of the financial spectrum. They see it a different way. They don't have the same experience. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that really goes back to what I was saying before about this widening spread between the haves and the have-nots. These people are just trying to stay afloat in terms of paying their bills. And as you said, they haven't benefited by the rebound of the stock market because they don't really have money in there. And one of my concerns about this economy as we go forward are the certain industries that are going to be impaired for the foreseeable future. I just got off a call earlier this morning with a client of mine whose wife is in the travel business, as is he, and he's been laid off. He was furloughed. That business is not going to come back anytime soon until people are comfortable that the pandemic is in fact over, or has been stopped by a vaccine, which in my personal opinion is that probably won't happen until towards the end of next year. I hope I'm wrong, but that's my view. You have other, we're in the Northeast, and you're already hearing stories about the restaurants. And I don't eat indoors, yes, I don't eat indoors. I eat outdoors. But the question is, am I going to want to be sitting out in a tent with a quartz heater in 20-degree temperature in January?
Right.
Probably not. All right. And that's going to be, and I feel for these restaurant owners. So many good restaurants here in the Boston area and throughout the country have closed and will probably continue to close. So there are going to be certain industries that just aren't going to come back. We finished our last segment up about real estate, commercial real estate, and there's certain segments of that have a lot of headwinds facing them, and there are going to be some problems. So the recovery, which on the face of it looks, I wouldn't say robust, it's probably too strong a term, but looks to be solid and progressing. The problem is, if you look under the covers, there are some industries that are very much impaired. It could get worse if we have a second wave, as they're experiencing now in, for example, the UK, and if we have a second wave here as well, it could be we could regress, several steps backwards.
So here's another question. Typically and traditionally, the economy is driven largely by consumer spending. And right now, what are we seeing in consumer spending? And is that in any way driving the stock market to gradually, the trend line is still that it's getting better? Does that affect it? Because is consumer spending even what it was before the coronavirus?
Camille, I'm going to tell you, I got to say that's a great question. I'm going to tell you why.
All her questions are great.
That's right. That's a particularly good question.
Yeah.
So I've seen some studies, and I can relate this a little bit to my own spending and perhaps to yours as well. So through the course of this pandemic so far, the haves have reduced their spending considerably. I know I had 2 trips that got canceled this year. I don't go out and eat inside restaurants. I don't go out to eat as often. I don't go to stores, okay, and buy clothes. My wife perhaps does, but I don't. But my point is that the statistics, consumer spending has stayed pretty strong, but has not been helped by higher end individuals, higher income, higher net worth. It has been sustained by the individuals that have been bailed by the stimulus, the $1,200 stimulus that was received earlier when the pandemic started, as well as unemployment. And in some cases, I think, as we discussed last time, the inclusion of the $600 unemployment, which ended, I think, July 31st, many individuals were actually doing better than they had while they were working. But because they're buying necessities, food and clothing if they have children, their spending, helped by the federal government, was sustained and maybe even increased. And since that's a larger percentage of the population, consumer spending did stay strong. It actually increased once these checks were received. But now the big question is, because now you talk about politics affecting the economy. Well, Republicans and Democrats are fighting over the next stimulus package. The Democrats want a much larger package, Republicans much smaller. And it's the infighting, the polarization, whatever you want to call it in Washington, that is preventing any kind of agreement. And I'm afraid that without it, you're going to see consumer spending drop significantly if the lower income individuals are not receiving those checks. And the other thing that could happen, of course, is that there's been a suspension of evictions, in the real estate market for apartments. That's going to end. And a lot of landlords and owners of real estate are actually hurting badly because they're not able to pay their mortgages. They have bills too. And that could be a domino effect as well as these, unless they renew it, of course, as this freeze on evictions passes and landlords start evicting tenants that can't pay.
Cliff, a lot of these, we're pretty much into real estate, and a lot of these people who don't pay, they're just taking advantage, and you know, there are some that aren't, but the real estate market is doing very well. And people, the sales have been up on sales of homes and houses and investments. And another thing that I read too, that you say people aren't going out. So what are they doing? They're home. So they're fixing up their houses.
That is true.
Painting this wall that hasn't been done, buying new furniture. So it's that's why when you read these reports about how this segment of the market is doing better and you go, why? That's why. I don't know. Does that affect the stock market too? You
Well,
know,
sure, but I just want to take your point one step further, and that is, I'm talking about certain segments of the commercial real estate market, and apartments are one of that. As we all know, in Eastern Massachusetts, but throughout the country, residential real estate is booming in many cases, especially around here. And also, as you also indicated, people are fixing up their homes. If they're going to be working remotely for a while, they want to be more comfortable. And so that has helped companies like Home Depot and Lowe's and so forth. So that part of the market, which is residential, is very strong. To my surprise, I think I indicated that to you on our last segment. But there's certain areas in the commercial market that are struggling. Others are doing well. I'll give you an example, one that's doing very well, and that is warehouse space. When you have companies like Amazon and Wayfair, whose sales have increased tremendously, they need more warehouse space. They want to have warehouse space closer to their customers. And so, the demand for warehouse space has increased to accommodate these online retailers. So again, you have to segment the real estate market. You're absolutely right, Roberta. The residential market is strong. The vacation market, again, we talked about this before, whether it be in Cape Cod, up in New Hampshire and Maine, the Hamptons in New York. These markets are very, very strong as people would, who are going to work remotely, if they live in the city. I can't tell you how many New Yorkers I know, people live in Manhattan, that have places in the Hamptons that had no desire to go back there anytime soon, even though Manhattan has recovered. They like the space that's afforded to them by having a place in the Hamptons or up in the Catskills. And I think that trend will likely continue for a while.
Now, here's something too. When you talked about the small businesses and the people, the consumers out there who may be unemployed now due to the pandemic, are we going to see a trend of more and more of them have to go into public assistance programs?
Well,
and if that's the case, isn't that going to increase taxes, which is really kind of defeating the whole purpose of trying to have it so that taxes don't go up?
Well, I think, quite honestly, I don't care who is elected on November 3rd, taxes are going to have to go up. We've just basically created $3 trillion of money to give, which I think was necessary, but it significantly increased our federal debt. We're going to need to address this at some point. Now, both parties have kicked this can down the road for the foreseeable future. All right. But I'm afraid this could be a problem down the road. Now, a lot of economists have discussed this and sounded the warning for a number of years now, and it hasn't come to fruition. And one of the reasons is that the US dollar is a currency of the world. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. But here's the bottom line. If our debt gets prohibitive enough where others do not buy our bonds, that is going to result in an enormous problem for us. So I do believe taxes are going to go up. I think they have to, as much as I don't want to have to pay higher taxes for the better good. We need to get this deficit under control. It was already rising by $1 trillion a year before the pandemic, and this was in a good economy. And so this may have accelerated the need to address it. And so that's a longer term issue. I don't think this is happening tomorrow. It may not be for another 10 years. Nobody knows. But it is something that will need to be addressed, or I'm afraid a day of reckoning will come.
Boy, we're going to be ready to wind up in a minute, or even less than a minute. But that's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. But in the end, it's if you're collecting, somebody's paying. Somebody's paying. Everybody can't collect.
Well, to your point, Roberta, so one of my I have millennial children, and my son's my son is in my industry and with me, and his friends say, well, where did this $3 trillion come from? Well,
Yeah.
basically it came from the Treasury printing money. All right.
Yeah.
And you want to know why some of these this is a whole other story. Cryptocurrencies have done well. Gold has done well. It's because the money, the real value of that money is now denigrated. And so, there's a day of reckoning. I don't think you can't continue to do this forever. I don't know when that time is. Nobody really does. You can only speculate. But there will come a time when we're going to have to address this issue. What bails this out, I don't want anybody leaving this session and thinking that, it's a Chicken Little mentality, but there's nobody on the, no world currency on the horizon, including the Chinese, that is going to take over the dollar, all right? But if it's not addressed and they see some improvement on this and it's addressed to the point where we're pulling back and slowly but surely getting back on track, there will be a problem down the road. Again, I don't know when that'll be.
Boy.
But it will happen, I'm afraid.
Well, I got a new expression now, kicking the can down the road. I love that one.
You like that one?
Yeah, I like
been going
that
on in
one.
Congress
That's been
forever.
going on
which
a
is,
long, long time.
a long time is right.
Book of definitions. Okay, so we thank you for coming on. I can't believe the time went by fast, but it
Are you
did.
done already? Are you serious?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
We'll have to do part 3 if you want.
By the time we wind up and
Oh, we
interrupt
will.
each other, we'll be over. we,
Oh
we
my
always,
goodness.
we always go over.
Yeah,
But
all right.
you are so great. He's so great.
I know.
I thank you.
Well, we'll
Yeah.
definitely have to continue this. It'll have to be a continuing series because it's such a complex topic.
I'll tell
Yeah.
you that a lot could change and probably will change after the election. And I don't know if we're going to have a better idea where it's going, but we'll certainly have changes.
There we
So
will.
that could be a
We'll
discussion
come back then.
for
That's
another
one thing
day.
that doesn't change is that we always have changes.
That's true. Change
Yeah,
is
that's
inevitable.
true.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let me just wrap up. To our viewers, thank you very much. I know that you're very interested in this topic because it affects all of us in one way or the other. And we thank Cliff Caplan for ingratiating us with his presence yet again. Please,
Yay.
viewers, let us know if you have any questions or if you have any ideas for related topics concerning the pandemic and how it's affected different aspects of life. Because remember, this is your show, The Law, Your Money, and You.
And you. And you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Cliff.